You can't put these so close to Erik. There's sugar in them.
Yeah. It's true.
That's our opening to this episode.
Yes.
What's up, everybody? We are a little distracted coming to you this time because there are hors d'oeuvres in front of us. Go ahead, Erik. You can dig it. Is in front of us.
Just for the people that might not be able to see behind the
For
thing.
those who are watching on YouTube now, you get to see, you are seeing currently what Erik is holding out in front of him, which is some jam. In front of me here, between Ryan Muckenhirn, who is our guest, along with Erik, of course, and then Mark's joining me as well, is some kind of a green half log with crackers. It's a speckled log. I'm not sure. It looks spreadable.
It is. It's butter.
That's butter.
It is.
What kind of butter?
It's ramp butter.
Ramp butter.
Correct.
And so these things are fitting, being that, and sorry, I almost missed one other thing on the table, which is, what are these?
Those are dried elderberries. I had the intention of making us all a cup of elderberry tea.
That sounds delightful.
But we ran out of time downstairs. We were a bit of a constraint. So
we would be full-on, full-send hippie on this podcast if we had that to round it out. But right now we're running
Heck, Jim, you're wearing the footwear for it.
Stop, I know, I'm in sandals.
I noticed that last week. Is everything all right?
Everything's fine. I just gotta. It's a thing. Anyway,
it's a thing.
Okay, but we want to talk about foraging and essentially gathering. Because we talk a lot about hunting, and the other side of that is the hunter-gatherer mindset. And so Mr. Muckenhirn over here does quite a bit of that. And being that at the time of this recording, it is spring, he's been quite busy. You've been telling us your stories of going out to a lot of public land spots, and which is pretty sweet, just going out and finding wild things that you can eat and consume. Erik, it's fine. You can eat the jam.
Which is which?
So this is Wisconsin raspberry. That's Wisconsin wild grape.
Oh, okay. Proceed.
So, we will probably be munching on some of these hors d'oeuvres while we're talking here, but it's kind of neat. And the more you explain it, that I've heard about it, I think Ryan has sort of inspired a lot of us here to at least think it's cool. I don't know. I haven't done it yet myself, to be honest. But the idea of getting your own food out there, plucking it out of the ground and stuff. But a lot of questions that I think I've had, and probably I guess if I had them, then the average Joe or Jane out there maybe has too. Mark and Erik, I guess. Erik just came along to eat. Mark, you might have some as well.
Erik's doing some modern foraging right now.
Yeah, let's talk about the jams.
Yeah.
Is that a good place to start, Ryan?
Absolutely.
It's a delicious place to start.
What is foraging? What are you doing when you're doing foraging?
Well,
exactly.
To me, it's just hunting plants.
Do you have to get a tag? Do you have to?
No,
are there limits?
We're pretty lucky in Wisconsin in that there is no permitization that I'm aware of at the level at which I do this required to go pick berries in the woods.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Or picking ramps or other vegetables, mushrooms, which I'm hoping we'll talk about. And can you tap maple trees for syrup?
I do. I did not.
Land?
I didn't bring any syrup with today.
That's quite all right.
I'm sorry. That's a big one. Yep.
Another thing I hope we talk about. But is the jam good spot to start?
Yep.
For
absolutely.
a hippie like yourself?
Absolutely.
Or in house. So when you're going out there, like, I'm curious, does every place that is, of course, there's many different habitats out there. You got desert people out there, desert people. People living in a desert climate, I'm sure they have different things, or maybe a lack of certain things that we have here in Wisconsin. But for example, in Wisconsin, can you just kind of go anywhere and find something that you can eat?
I will say this. When I moved out here, I'm from central Minnesota originally. I didn't know what to think. This is a superior state in that regard.
Whoa.
There's no question about it.
You finished that with "in that regard." I thought it was just about to end at superior state.
No. But in terms of like the biodiversity and the wildlife and the opportunity and the amount of just stuff to eat and do outside, Wisconsin's got her pegged, man.
That's cool.
Big time.
And you found these berries and grapes here. They're wild.
Yep.
You just went to some spot, public land, just started looking around. How do you know? You've been able to smell certain things. Do you smell berries when you're walking up or what?
No, I don't smell berries. Mushrooms I can smell, but berries I can't. I could smell flowers. Like I could walk us into a wood and be like, okay, there's an apple or something like an apple upwind.
And then the mushrooms, they help you smell colors.
Yeah, correct. And that's really where this all started.
Okay.
No, those are very visual, like vibrant. You can see them from a long ways away. Even the stalks pre-season in the wintertime, I do a lot of berry scouting. And in the fall time when I'm out hunting, I come across a spot that's like, oh yeah, this is gonna be a good raspberry patch or a good blackberry patch.
You can tell that in winter.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Raspberries and blackberries have a pretty distinct looking stem. The raspberries are like kind of a deep purple. The blackberries are very dark red. They're thorny. They're very large. They have a very distinct sweep to their shape. The way they grow in a cluster in a group, definitively that is a raspberry patch or that is a blackberry patch.
Huh.
And so I drop a lot of tags on my Onyx for that. And they don't have a berry thing on there yet, but maybe they'll hear this and add a berry thing.
I was going to ask if there was. I haven't seen one.
They do have a mushroom though.
I put deer feeder when I. So I was out the other day picking morels. And came across a stellar blackberry patch, and so I dropped a deer feeder button there.
Naturally. Yeah. So, a lot of times when you're out there in the woods, I remember as a kid, and you'd go out there with your first grade field trip, and it was, everybody'd find these little tiny, red berries, and, the teacher's like, don't eat those, they're poisonous, whatever. How do you determine, okay, that's not good, that's poisonous, that's...
So I've got a lot of field manuals.
I've gotten to the point now where it seems like I feel like out of pure worry and just over paranoia from adults as a child, I just figure if I see a berry in the wild, I'm just like, yeah, it's probably poisonous. I'm not gonna risk it.
That's what I was gonna ask, because I think that's a big barrier to entry into getting into this is that uncertainty. You're like, man, that looks good. It looks good. It's like you said, it's vibrant. It's brightly colored. It looks delicious.
Right.
But, is it going to put you to sleep permanently?
Is it going to cause internal bleeding and massive hemorrhaging and diarrhea?
Yeah.
There's not a lot in Wisconsin that will do that, or the Midwest, but there are some. There are toxic berries out there. And so if you're thinking about doing this, you haven't done it before going out in the woods and getting a smattering of brightly colored berries, buy some field manuals.
Yeah.
They're not expensive. Most of them are colored. They're the ones that I use are really nice. They're by color of the berry in different stages. So in the springtime when almost all the berries are green, you can look at that in green, and then you can go to your reds, and then your purples, and then your blacks, and you can kind of decipher what you're looking at on there. And they have a picture of the plant in the stem structure, the leaf structure, the berry clusters, how they look. They talk about toxicity. They talk about edibility. They describe whether it's a delicious or whether it's just an edible, because there is a difference there. And so when I forage, people ask me well, you must not grocery shop. And that's fairly ridiculous. When I'm out foraging, it's not like I'm gathering food to sustain me through the course of the rest of the year. It's literally low-hanging fruit. It's things that I can gather a lot of quickly and easily, and that's tasty and delicious. I also don't eat jars of jam by the spoonful, but
like Erik is about to do.
Right.
Yeah.
No, me
I don't do that either.
Totally. Why would anybody do that?
That's weird.
That is some phenomenal jam, by the way. I just tried the berry. I'm going to try the grape next.
Yeah, the black cap, we call it, or the raspberry is really good.
That is.
Yeah, and it was a new recipe, too. I hadn't done that one before, and so that's... I try to use as little added sugar as possible, so I've been experimenting with different pectins used, or not using pectin at all as an additive to the jams and jellies.
Not using it at all.
Yeah, and so the raspberry is
Granny wouldn't like that.
Is how much can we boil this down until it gels and solidifies, and the raspberry turned out really, really good.
And when there's quite a bit of work, in addition to just, you can just pick them and eat them, I'm sure, right? I mean, that's as simple as it gets. But if you want to do some stuff with it like this jam, I mean, that's quite a bit of work to then take it home.
Yeah.
And like you said, you're boiling stuff down. I mean, what other kind of supplies do you have to get? Because I'm sure it'll dovetail into the maple syrup and stuff. But are you getting big turkey fryer pots and outdoor gas burners and stuff to do all this?
So I have totes and totes and totes of the little ball canning jars, lids, rings. I have canning equipment. I have
That is so good. I'm sorry to interrupt.
I have boiling equipment, and for a dude who doesn't like sweet, and to see Jimmy happy about that, I'm pretty happy about that.
I normally hate sweets.
Wait till you have that.
I know that's next. I'm gonna try it now, but it's gonna be all I can do not to talk about it until we get to that. But
yeah, it is a lot of equipment, and I tend to go pretty big on it. I get really fanatical about berries, like as much as I would hunting. To me, it's as important for me to get out and gather berries and like things like grapes and berries and things like that, just as it is to hunt.
you do get super stoked about this season of time. Like I've noticed that, usually most people are kind of like, well, it's spring. I guess we'll just kind of wait it out until fall comes around. But you're jacked, man. You're driving all over the state.
Yep.
Well, talk about productive scouting too. Not only are you, getting outside, enjoying the outdoors, picking berries and having that, berries, mushrooms, whatever, having that experience. But I imagine you're going to find some good deer trails along the way as well.
Oh, yeah.
Turkeys gobble.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's, what do you think of that, Jim?
Yeah, that was the rant butter. We'll get to that in a bit, but holy crap, I could eat that thing straight.
Yeah. It is. And it's really, like I said, it's as important to me to be out there looking for berries as it is to be out chasing whitetails or mule deer, antelope, or turkeys or whatever. It's that exciting to me. It's that fulfilling to me, and it does. When you're in the off season, you do come in off season to hunting. I should say you do come across a tremendous amount of property that you would have otherwise ignored, possibly until later in the year when you should have been out there in April, May, June looking for deer sign, looking for rubs, looking for bedding areas, looking for feeding areas. It's an amazing.
Which some of the stuff would be a feeding area for a deer.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh
Maybe?
yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
All of it is in places that I share with whitetails.
Yeah.
That's a question I had. Do you find that certain terrain features or habitat features or soil moistures are conducive to different,
Yeah, definitely. So that lets me come up with all these neat theories on why I find ramps somewhere and not somewhere else, or where I find morels, and what kind of trees morels grow by. Like the big one is elm.
Yeah.
I didn't find any of these morels I found this year by any elm trees. I know that elm trees, there is a correlation, right?
Yeah, there's some kind of a weird magic voodoo potion.
Of the majority of the morels that I found this year was all shagbark hickories and cedar trees. So,
do you find anything with the soil there? I could be totally wrong. I don't know a lot about this at all. But when I do find morels, it always seems that soil is like a sponge.
Yeah,
really spongy, kind of airy, moist.
Yep.
Are you finding the same
loamy
thing?
kind of thing?
Yep,
absolutely. Sure. Yeah, but not too wet. Whereas ramps, on the other hand, my ramp spot, the ground is almost saturated. And I've got a ramp patch. I've got a couple of them that are just huge. They're like acres. And both of them are really interesting spots where everything just adds up and it shows up there. It is pretty cool. It's very interesting. I don't know enough about soil composition or pH or acidity.
It'd be interesting to take a soil
That's
sample.
what I was wondering, yeah.
And that probably is the next level that somebody who wants to become an adept forager takes in order to maybe go look at a soil survey map and combine that with a topographical map and combine that with a hardwoods and forest density map and try to plot where you would find a particular plant or fungus based on that. There is no difference when you think about it that way, as you would read a topo to figure out where a mule deer would be or a whitetail would be. So
I gotta say too, going hunting with you as well. People talk about. You see some people when they go hunting and they're sitting out there, they're waiting around, or in a Midwestern hunt, maybe you're sitting in a tree stand or not moving a whole lot, waiting around for any deer to come by or to catch any sign of something. Some people will literally, take a nap. There's the old classic prairie nap, which we've all done. I did a woods nap in Indiana the other day. Not the other day, but a couple weeks back with when we were turkey hunting. Anyway.
Glorious.
Good, glorious woods nap. But, some people bring a book or other things like that, and if that's what they're into, go for it. But
reading.
The thing that I've always appreciated is that when we're out with Ryan, all of a sudden it's everything in the woods is cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Stuff I would have just walked by and I'm kind of tree, grass, generic plant. He's like, oh, look, a plum thicket. Oh, yeah. Look at this berry, or whatever. And it's when we were in remember we were in Nebraska, all of a sudden we found these like bright red berries that were like the only thing you could see in this just white tundra-esque looking area.
Rose
and then
hips.
it's like, rose. What were they?
Rose hips.
Rose hips. Yeah.
You ate one, Jim.
I did eat one, and because I asked him, I was like, "This looks like something my first grade teacher on a field trip would have told me not to eat."
Right.
And he
I
was
thought
like,
you were
"Nope,
supposed to
good
dry
go."
those, though.
Yeah, you dry them, you make a tea out of them, but you can eat them as is.
Oh yeah,
You
it
can.
wasn't-
I thought they were toxic as is.
No, not a rose hip.
Great.
That's super.
I am
Could've
still
eaten
here
them
to
because
tell
of-
you,
Well, I saw you eat it, and I was like, all right, well,
And see you, Jim.
Mark,
knock
Mark,
yourself more deer for me.
Mark got his classic nervous face. But I would venture to guess that those are probably not on the. What did you say? There's like
Low-hanging
some
fruit list?
No, there's some that you said are edible and some that are
Oh
what,
yeah, not
delicious or
not
something.
delicious, but edible.
Yeah, it was just pretty bland.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that I bypass. So I'm not like supplementing my diet to a major level with a lot of stuff that I gather. Rose hips would be one of those things. Like I think it's interesting enough that every year I go out and I collect enough of them to eat some and be like, well, I mean, I guess you could if you had to make a go of it, but they're not on my to-do list.
I remember we were talking about. I'm no expert when it comes to this, as with many things, as people already know. But high in vitamin C, if I recall.
Yep.
Had to do a
So-
quick mic change there while he was munching on some.
Why wouldn't
Asking
you?
somebody a question when he's munching on his ramp butter.
Yeah.
Just a
So
sin.
the rose hip, you can make into tea.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't add a lot of flavor to the tea though either?
No,
Okay.
It just kind of is one of those like
It's a
herbal
thing. It's-
remedies
yeah,
or
it's-
something.
it's earthy. It's herbal. It's
Yeah.
like the elderberries too. I really enjoy the taste of them in a tea, but I think when people hear the word berry, you're like, oh, it's going to be this sweet,
Right.
zingy thing. It's no, it's kind of like a anisey, earthy, herbally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good for
Good
you
though.
though.
Oh, it's probably
Yep.
exceptionally good for you. A lot of this stuff we're talking about is probably good for you.
Except for the ramp butter, we're literally eating raw, just sheer butter spread on crackers right now. So
That's why it's so good.
It's good for you, Ryan. Okay.
I like it.
But so let's go going back to sweet things.
Yeah.
We'll also dovetail into, like I was saying, the maple syrup. Or are there other syrups too? I'd have to imagine.
not
right?
that
Maybe?
not that I really do. No,
Is
there's-
maple about it?
Yeah, you can do birch. You can do the shag bark, which is kind of a weird deal. But I focus primarily on maple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And okay, this question applies to I'm like gonna back out of maple syrup for a bit, but we'll go back in. But I was gonna ask, like, is spring the only time to do all this stuff? It seems like so many things are such a tight window where it's like morel hunting season, for example.
It's like 2 weeks.
One day they're not there, the next day they're there,
Yep.
then the next day you're like, oh crap, morel season's over.
Yep.
Right.
And then, like ramp season, you said that you could go somewhere and there's ramps as far as your eye can see, and then you could go back a week later and you would never know that they were
Correct.
there.
Yeah. So I haven't been to my patch in a couple of days. We've had some weather change. It's supposed to be 86 tomorrow. I'm not going to have time to get out there until like Sunday. I'm not going to be surprised if I get out there and there's none left.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, they just do that. They're just woof gone.
Really?
Yeah, once they flower, they just kind of disappear shortly thereafter, a few days, and
Can you
Do
tell
they
by
just kind
looking?
of wilt and die then, or what?
yeah, they like it's like they just retract back into the
Can you
ground.
tell by looking at the ground, like, oh yeah, there were ramps there?
No,
or like,
no,
seriously,
no. Once you get out there, it's gone. Like there's no
it's crazy.
real remnant.
No even sign.
Not really.
And now will that patch be there again next year?
Yeah,
Really?
Yeah, no, hopefully it grows.
Is-
One of the patches was diminished. I'm not going to state by over harvesting because I don't know that to be absolutely the truth.
Yeah.
When I went out there, I was a little bit dismayed at the diminishment from the last
Yeah.
year. Now they did some logging back there too, and they opened up the canopy a little bit. They cut down quite a bit of trees. They're doing kind of a native tree restoration thing, so they got rid of some other trees in there, and that like introduction of light onto the understory is going to change the dynamic completely.
Yeah.
And so that could have been part of it. I did see some other stuff growing in that area that wasn't there last year, as far as like a small green leafing plant. So it could just be that too. I'm hoping it's not over harvesting. It's interesting because it's like right on a major trail. Like people run them over, and just to see that there's that many of them there with that trail cutting through it makes me pretty happy that it's not being over harvested.
It's also it's also amazing that like so many people go by and don't even know.
Oh yeah,
Right.
definitely. Yep.
I bet that happens all the time with
Oh,
this
yeah.
stuff.
I was gonna say. So that's what I was gonna ask. So for those who may not be familiar with the ramp, maybe
Why not?
describe it.
Why not explain it?
Sure.
Yeah, what it
because
is.
I know that too. So one of the other things, we'll get back to maple syrup, however it works. This is just random. Who cares? But one of my other things was onions versus garlic versus ramp versus that stuff.
Cool. So we'll jump into ramps first because they're low hanging fruit, and when you find a good patch of them, you usually find a good patch of them. So they're kind of related to onions, leeks, and garlics. 2, maybe 3 leaves coming out of the ground. Very, very delicate plant. Like when you handle them, they bruise very easily. They wilt. They tear. When you unearth them, you get a small bulb, probably the size of a marble, is like the average. They can get a little bit bigger than that. I find them maybe like the size of a shooter marble. Very flavorful. Like you can tell the ramp butter is very strong. There's way less butter flavor than there's ramp flavor. And so per pound of butter, it's like maybe 15 ramps. It's like, so there's a lot of, we'll call it heat to them. Or flavor to them. So they're a super, super tasty treat. Kind of a combination between onion and garlic with like a little dab of horseradish.
Yeah, I'm picking up on that. I was trying to pick up on what the other thing was in there, but definitely a mixture of onion and garlic.
Yeah.
Or like that taste to it.
Very, very tasty snack. It's kind of one that I'm very hesitant when I harvest them because it's really easy to over-harvest them, and they're super popular. And I think it's because they look cool, and they're a very attractive plant, and I think that they look nice on a table and a cutting board. And
they're like the Welsh corgi of plants.
Yeah, man. And so
all of a sudden that became the hipster dog to get, and people are overbreeding them.
Right. I mean, they're certainly very delicious, and
it's a problem.
And so I take like minimal quantity when I do it.
And then, as far as edibleness, the whole plant, the bulb, everything.
Yep, I cut the roots off.
Even the leaves?
Yep. So that's where the green color comes from.
Really?
So otherwise the ramp bulb itself is white, and then as it goes up the stem into the leaf portion that's above the ground, that kind of goes to a red and then green. So the green in the butter, that's where that comes from. So yeah, I'll take the leaves. Obviously they get mixed into the ramp butter, but I'll also dice them and use them as I would, even chopped onions. They still carry a ton of flavor, or even a garnish. You can make a great pesto out of them. I dried them this year and made a powder. And so
ramp powder.
Yep, correct. That's a new one for me. I never did that before.
Are you using a dehydrator to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So they dehydrate really well. They've got.
And you're just using that like as a cooking accent.
Yeah, just a seasoning to it, and it does add a ton of punch. So
interesting.
Yep. So like you would basil or chopped chives or something like that.
That's cool.
I can tell you on one of my most delightful mornings in the great state of Wisconsin. Went up to visit Ryan. It was springtime. We canoed around the Wisconsin River.
Gosh, you guys have such a bromance.
First off, we got there. We're going fishing. We got there very early. We just sipped coffee for a couple hours.
We did.
And then we got in the canoe, and Ryan paddled me around while I cast a boot with my chartreuse crank.
Yep.
Caught a trophy sauger.
Nice sauger, too. Like, no joke, nice sauger.
Really?
Oh, man.
And then we proceeded to go back to the house, and we had sauger, eggs, and fresh ramps. And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
That sounds like such a Ryan Muckenhirn kind of day.
It was a great day.
It was one of the best dates I've ever had.
I can absolutely see that being the case.
It was grand.
And how does that, because we've mentioned now onions and garlic too. How do they relate? Also, I think one thing's interesting. Mark, you remember when we posted like a picture of it was you and me, and then we were out there with Trent Brenny and Erik turkey hunting in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought we found a bunch of wild onions that we were eating. Ryan explained to me that was actually garlic. We were eating wild garlic.
Really?
Which
whatever they were, we hit the jackpot.
Yeah, it was unreal.
Full disclosure, up until I found that patch a couple weeks ago, my whole life I thought those were wild onions because
they're like green shoot. They look just like
it looks like a shallot.
Correct.
Yeah.
It looks just like the green onions you get at the grocery store. Which apparently are those even garlic?
No, those are onions. So here's the wild part. So when I found that by accident. I was out looking for mushrooms, and and I looked down like through the woods, and I saw
you can
this.
smell those.
Yeah.
Too.
I was a ways away. I looked and I saw this like different colored green, like very not the same green as everything else in the understory. So I walked over them like, holy crap, it's wild onions. And so I dug a few out. I knew they weren't ready yet. The bulbs were very small. And I went back to one of my field manuals because I wanted to see like, well, that's weird. I've been all over this woods over the past 5 years, like a dozen times a year, looking for mushrooms and looking for ramps and sheds and things like this. I'd never seen them before. All of a sudden, bam, there's this huge proliferation of this plant. I thought, well, is this somebody's garden escape? Like, did somebody pitch, a planter box out here for whatever reason?
Yeah.
And it turned to that. Well, I'm going through there and I'm getting to like the onions, leeks, and garlics, and I come across wild garlic, and it's wild garlic, and you can differentiate the two by the stem or leaf, whatever you want to call it, shape and structure. So the garlic is a tube, the onion is a leaf. And that blew my mind. Because my whole life, every time I found it, I'm like, oh, look at that. It's wild onion. It's wild garlic. So I did pick some the other day, and I cooked it up, and it tastes like onion or garlic, kind of a mix between the two.
Well, who knows anymore?
Well, yeah,
It's just like my 10-year-old nephew went up to me the other day and he goes, hey, look at that towel over there. It's orange, right? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, what if orange to you is what green looks like to me, but we both call it orange? So it's like, what if people are tasting stuff and it's like everybody just always told me, yeah, that's garlic, but it's onion, and onion is garlic. Up is down. Who knows what is what anymore?
What are we? What is this?
I think in life, there's no point to existence.
It sounds like there's been a lot of foraging going on.
It sounds like there's a lot. Dude, we didn't break out. There's no mushrooms in this room, folks. But, sorry, we got a lot of full mouths here.
Everybody went for it at the same time.
I've recovered.
Yeah, you guys thought I was really going to go on my soapbox there, but I cut it short.
So that was a cool one. Onions, garlics, leeks. There's a lot of them.
If those stayed there for a while, would they turn into like a garlic thing, like you see at the grocery store, the paper around it, and you kind of split off the cloves and stuff?
In a form not as developed from what I read now, but turns out my whole life I've been harvesting them at the wrong time, thinking that they were onions. Let them mature a little bit, then harvest them, and they're somewhat cloved, but not to that degree. So remember, in the domestication process, over the course of however many centuries, that it took us to domesticate these wild berries. Like, for instance, look at the color of that raspberry jam. It's almost
like blackberry. Yeah.
Right. If you were to hold that raspberry in your hand and then hold like a store-bought raspberry, they have zero semblance to each other other than they're kind of shaped similarly, right? Whereas your store-bought...
that makes it even more confusing for your average Joe who goes out and finds them, because they're like, what is this?
Right. And I hear a lot of people say, oh, they're blackberries. But we in selective breeding in agriculture and in livestock and animal husbandry, we breed for a trait, right? So I have to assume that when we were making garlic, because garlic's delicious, we bred for a trait. Like we crossed for this, we crossed for that. And you end up with this...
The ones that get bigger and produce more garlic are better.
Right. So go to a garlic festival. I don't know if actually that's a thing out here. It is in my hometown. We have a big garlic festival.
Serious?
Yeah, it's huge. People come from all over the country. But you can buy garlic seed, and there are hundreds and hundreds of varieties, and garlics that are like burn your mouth hot, and garlics that are like sweet potato sweet. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, it's just different. But
Jason over there came in one time with black garlic.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It was like it was like fermented garlic, and you're supposed to eat. Like, I ate a whole clove of it, and I was kind of like, "This is gonna kill me." And he was like, "No, trust me." And it was like sweet. It was like black licorice almost.
Really?
Anyway.
But that's that on the onions, leeks, and garlics. Great thing to forage if you cook a lot and you need like a seasoning. So I make the ramp butter. I dry the leaves. I dry down and chip the bulbs themselves, just like you would buy like onion flakes,
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the ramp butter?
Yo.
Is that literally just ramps and butter?
That is Kerrygold butter and ramps.
And you mince them in something?
Food processor.
Food processor.
Yep. So blanch. So take the Kerrygold, let it get. Oh, by the way, I learned this the hard way. Let it get soft, like room temperature for several hours soft.
Would you try to chuck it in like a full-on brick of butter?
It was soft-ish, but it was definitely not soft. So it added a ton of time. And before, I never had a food processor. I was like, I'm not going to spend $110 on a fancy blender. Game changer. So before, did this by hand, like cut the ramps into it using 2 ulus and then mixing them together. Food processor makes short work of that. But blanch the ramps very quickly. It's like 15 to 20 ramps per pound of butter.
Wait, sorry, what's blanch?
Boil really like 15 seconds tops. So take your product, in this case the ramps, drop it into boiling water, 15 seconds tops, take them out, put them into an ice bath.
Huh. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
what does that do? Release a bunch of like the aroma or whatever? Or?
It's supposed to help with the preservation of flavor and like for long-term things and to break down some of the cellular structure of the plant so that it's not like this woody thing to eat.
Okay.
Yeah. So it becomes like the texture or consistency of like wilty spinach from a can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then, just mix it up. And then I've got a little, I actually use an AeroPress, which is made for making coffee, but the tube and the little press part, I pack it full with a tablespoon, and then I extrude that out onto wax paper, roll it, and freeze it. So I have like a little 3-pound log of. I've got a whole bunch of them now. Couple.
It is excellent.
Yeah, it's really good.
Brilliant.
And so if you're cooking with it, like you can spread it on a cracker, that's great. On bread, it's even better. And if you really want to win, you take ramp butter and antelope, and you baste the antelope on a high heat cast iron with the melted ramp butter.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's pretty much the greatest thing that's ever happened.
There's something about like salt, pepper, and onion and or garlic / ramp, which I haven't had enough of, where it's like that's all.
It's about all you need.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Anything more than that, we're trying pretty hard.
Everything in the world tastes good with salt and pepper and like garlic / onion / both.
Yep. Agreed. So
you mentioned one thing too, real quick, when we were talking about ramps. Too many people just go through and they just snip the leaves off the top.
Very, very interesting thing. So I'm torn. Like I'm at this juxtaposition where it's very exciting to see people acknowledging that the world has a ton to offer you, like in the woods. Like go spend time in it. You can make a crack at it. And it's a great place. And then people trying to capitalize on that. And so there's a lot of farmers markets around here, and posted on one of the foraging groups that I belong to was a picture of a young lady who had gone down to the farmers market and picked up some, quote, wild ramp. She was wondering some recipes and some preparations. And what she had purchased for an exorbitant amount of money was simply the top leaves of the ramp.
Effectively missing the best part.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So my assumption is that the individual selling them found out they were worth some kind of money, went out, found a patch of them, and either took a scissors to them or just ripped them out of the ground, not extracting the bulb, and literally sold her the leaves. And so for that half of me that's like, wow, we should really have some education when it comes along with how to sustainably harvest in the woods so that, one, we don't damage the crop and it's there next year so other people can enjoy it and it continues to proliferate, and 2, we don't capitalize on a resource like that because it's not permitized. It's not something that you have to buy a stamp for. You don't have to have a license for.
Right. There's no limit.
No. Whereas, if I want to go catch a sunfish in Wisconsin, you have to pay several dollars to have a stamp. And we don't have that with wild forage. There's actually a conversation I was having yesterday with one of the coworkers. You can't sell wild game.
I was just going to bring that up.
Mm-hmm. But you can sell wild forage.
Yep.
And
never thought of it that way.
And to me, I don't really know what the difference is.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I'm not sure I see the difference.
No, I don't at all.
If you go on Facebook Marketplace right now and you just type in morel, and you're in our region, $30 a pound is what it's going for. And that doesn't happen with ducks. You can't go buy ducks from somebody. You can't go buy geese from somebody. You can't go buy deer from somebody. You end up in jail,
right?
And get fined a considerable amount. But we're allowed to with foraged, foraged goods like mushrooms and like ramps and things. And so I think it's got to be treated very, very carefully because it can get decimated. Like you can have a ramp patch, and I've seen it before back home where I've got this great patch and somebody gets into it and they take it all and it never comes back. Or it takes decades for it to come
It's
back.
like, what are they going to need to do with all that stuff? Because you said you take pretty minimal amounts, try and leave. For looking ahead for the future, and you wind up having enough ramps for
ever,
Right.
for like the whole rest of the year until the next time, right?
Correct.
Like how many ramps would you say that it takes, or how many of like I don't know berries or other stuff does it take for you to last the whole year?
So with ramps, I can tell you it was 2 grocery bags full this year. So
Really?
Like 2 plastic grocery bags or something?
Correct.
And how long did that take you to accumulate all that?
15 minutes a bag.
Really?
Yep. So you can see where if somebody was looking to make a buck at a farmer's market, they could make a couple $100.
I'm actually
Like
shocked.
how much was there total? Like probably like hundreds of grocery bags.
Yeah,
Thousands.
yes, easily. Yeah, tons. But it's a delicate thing. So, and that's just kind of a weird deal. I'm slightly juxtaposed. I really like it that people are going out and doing it. I'm seeing more people doing it. I'm seeing these groups pop up where it's people that have never left the city and they're discovering the phenomenalness that is the outside world, and they're doing it through foraging.
Right. Well, and what a nice introduction too. I mean, those are possibly future hunters too.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Like, wait a minute.
Or at the very least, just conservationists.
Conservationists.
Yeah. Now they take true pride and ownership in that area that they're into. So
and not everybody's a good egg, but a lot of them that maybe over harvest an area. They're not necessarily doing it on purpose.
No, certainly not.
Right? A lot of it, like you said, is just education where they're like, they just don't know.
Right.
And they just think like, well, if I pick them all, they'll probably come back.
Right.
I'm actually shocked that a person who essentially you're selling those things commercially, that there's not
some kind of
some sort of regulation, permitization.
It is interesting.
Yeah. Because I mean, think about that from a deer, or like you said, a duck or fish. Like, think about if someone was just out shooting deer and profiting tenfold on those deer.
Right.
Like that would never last.
Yeah. No. The other thing is too is they paid to shoot that deer.
Right.
Well,
unless they poached it.
We tried it. It didn't work. Right. Now we have a new system.
Right. Yeah. It didn't work to the point that we almost
lost
shut
everything.
Down. The wood duck was almost gone.
Yeah.
The canvas backs were almost gone. So just if you're thinking about getting into foraging, just
literally food for thought.
Yeah,
right.
Be responsible.
Yeah.
And it is, you do get into this almost frantic mode where you're like, wow, I got to get it all because I'm going to eat through it all. And like I said, I'm not supplementing I'm not foraging to feed myself. Like, it's a candy, it's a treat.
Yeah.
So
right.
That's why we then evolved into gardeners. Right. That's why we started agriculture, because it wasn't sustainable on that sense. So we had to, make food plots for ourselves, basically.
But you garden too, right?
I do, yeah.
Human plots.
you get a lot more out of gardening, I think. Except for mushrooms. I don't grow mushrooms yet. I'm talking about it though.
Really?
So, yeah, shiitake plug-in.
How do you go about growing
do you
mushrooms?
plant them like a seed? Like, here you go, little mushroom grow.
So you take a hardwood. A lot of folks use oak, from what I understand, and I know very little about mycology, so don't quote me if it's not oak. Soak the oak, drill a hole in it, and you buy these neat little plug kits. I think most of them are from Japan and some domestically, and then you plug the holes in these logs that you've soaked. Keep it in a cool, damp place, your basement or in the woods, and pretty soon you have shiitakes blossoming out of this thing. And if you guys want to see something cool, hop on the Google machine and type in shiitake mushroom farm, and you'll see these beautiful, what look like Lincoln log structures of hardwoods blossoming with shiitakes. And I think a shiitake is one of the best mushrooms out there. So I'm thinking about doing that. Not commercialization, but like the domestication of the morel is something that has been happening quite a bit lately. Guys are starting to figure it out. Some scientists are getting on board. A lot of the folks over in Asia have kind of reportedly mastered the growth of the morel.
Really?
Yeah, it's wild to see them like growing fields of morels, so to speak.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
For so long,
You couldn't.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Or like it's not figured out.
I was on my phone looking up the quote from The Departed because I wanted to find it because it could say, feds are like mushrooms, feed them shit and keep them in the dark.
Right.
That's unreal.
That's how you grow them.
Yep.
That is interesting.
But we digress. Like at that point in time, I have a garden. I grow like potatoes and peppers. And
I wanted you to talk about how you grow potatoes. Super interesting.
About potato towers?
Yeah, potato towers.
Oh, yeah. So pretty strapped for space. I live in a pretty small little box Mark's bin there. I got to stay 3 feet away from the walls.
It's quaint.
Because it's like an A-frame. So potato tower, take yourself, you can use a tall laundry basket if you really want to be cool, but I think chicken wire works better. Make a kind of a tower out of it, if that makes sense. Roll your chicken wire up until it's a column. And then layer of dirt, layer of straw, and then potato cuttings in there. Layer of dirt.
When you say potato cuttings, you're literally talking about take slices of potatoes.
Go to your store. Go buy your potatoes. You can buy seed potatoes too, and they're a lot better for doing this. But you can take a potato and you can cut it in quarters and then put it in a bag and let it scar, if you will, or like it kind of gets a rind on it.
Okay.
And put that in the ground. And if there's like the little eye on the potato part on the outside, boop, you got a potato plant.
What's the eye? What are you talking about there?
You know when your potatoes are under your sink for a long time and they get like the growths, the nodules?
Oh, yeah.
That.
That becomes a potato.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, like the course of weeks and weeks, going through summer and into early fall, your potato tower, this structure that you've erected out of chicken wire, has all these like branches coming out of it. And then at the end of the year, you kick it over and you sift through the dirt and you pick out the
You
potatoes.
said that you like layer it though,
Yeah,
right? So
yep.
you'll do like dirt, straw, potato things.
Yep.
Dirt, straw, potato things, dirt, straw, potato things, and then you'll just stack it as high as it'll go. And then by the end of the year, there's just a bunch of potatoes
a bunch
in there.
of spuds, man.
How big are they?
They don't really get that big.
Kind of like the little baby russet ones or something like that?
Little fellas, like 50-cent piece or smaller. But
You can just
make a ton of them.
Oh,
you know? Yeah. So if you're going to grow like big potatoes, you put them in the ground. But I don't have the space, so
gotcha.
I don't do that. But
I dig the potato towers. I think they're awesome. I had it on my Mark. I came into this one with notes.
I know. I saw
See
that.
this thing?
Made me nervous.
I know it's weird. Do you? I would assume that you probably think you discussed it almost a little bit. Foraging is more fun than gardening.
yeah,
But
way more
gardening
fun.
is just more productive.
Way more productive.
Okay.
Yeah. For certain things though, like take berries for example, and I'll pick on mulberries because mulberries are like probably the easiest thing to forage. And if you're in Wisconsin, you might not even know that mulberries are a thing, or that they're even edible. But coming up here pretty quick, usually around mid to late June, I'd have to look back and look at my records and see when they start popping. Mulberry berries, a bush or a tree, they can get pretty big. And there's two kinds of Wisconsin. We have whites, we have reds. I hear that they're the same thing, only different. I prefer the reds.
They look like raspberries and blackberries.
Yep, from trees. The white,
they're like really long.
correct. The white ones look like maggots. So here's
Delicious.
yeah. 'Cause the white ones are kind of creamier. So here's with those, you find yourself a good mulberry, and they're not held onto the tree very hard. They're very like lightly attached.
Oh, they do look like maggots. I've had these before, and they are
Oh,
good.
wow.
They are
Yep.
good.
And so get a tarp. So I take like an 8x10. I put it under the tree, and I shake the tree like an ape as hard as I can. And then there's like 1,000 berries on my tarp, and then I put them into a bucket. They require almost no effort at all. They're like a low yield when it comes to taste. They don't have a ton of like
That's
overwhelming flavor.
So that's what I was going to ask, because you turned
Yeah.
me on to the mulberries. Found a bunch of trees close to my house.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty common once you know what to look for. Picked them, ate them, made some mulberry milkshakes. Just put them in the old blender with some ice cream.
Fun colors for sure.
Oh, they look phenomenal.
Yep.
Not a lot of taste.
Not a lot going on there, but they make a great jelly, jam, and pie and addition. Get a lot of rhubarb.
Is
So
the
like
key to add some sugar then?
Yeah, kind of. You got to sweeten them up. Lemon juice is all good too. But I do I've got a mulberry jam that's just mulberries.
Okay.
And it's good. I like it. I think it's a lot more subtle than like a raspberry or a blackberry or a dewberry or whatever. But it's very good. It's got a nice consistency. It's a fun flavor. And
Appreciate it for what it is.
yeah, for me, a lot of this is like anytime I eat something that I harvest when I'm hunting, like I get a little weird on this. Like the first bite of the first wild game animal I take of the year, whether it's a spring turkey or whether it's a grouse or a duck or a deer, or whatever, is like the most emotionally overwhelming meal for that year of me. And I get the same thing when it comes to berries. And so when mulberries are ready to drop or pick or whatever, I get pretty excited. I eat them by the handful. It just represents something that's very special.
Now, when you shake a tree like an ape and you basically then are dropping thousands of berries.
Yeah.
Are berries kind of different than ramps in that regard, where it's like, can you over-harvest berries? Like, because the tree's going to produce berries every year, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not like you're literally removing the tree from the ground and then taking the berries away.
I mean, if we really shake it down, technically, yeah, you could. So let's say you had one raspberry plant, okay? And like that was your singular raspberry plant. So one stalk growing on the ground. You pick all the berries off it. You've removed its means to seed nearby and proliferate as a species. Now, the plant could go on and live for a long time if it gets proper nutrients and doesn't get mowed over or whatever. But it'll only be that plant until it seeds and another plant grows.
I see.
Yeah.
It seems like it'd be almost difficult to do though, because
unless
if you're hitting that same spot like daily, but whenever you go, like even the mulberry trees, like you go, these ones are ripe today.
The tree's gonna keep
tomorrow.
growing.
Some more are ripe. So
let's say you got them all. You would only have that plant. It could you could never grow new plants because it didn't have a means to seed. But I don't think that's like logical. You'd have to really.
I'm following you.
Yeah.
All right.
It's funny, hearing you talk about like that first wild game of the season, and it is so special. When I was recently up in Southeast Alaska chasing bears with some really good friends and awesome media guys. Rob Inslee, Outdoor Line Radio. He also Prince of Wales sport fishing up on Prince of Wales, but we caught some kings, and for really everybody, it was like their first, fresh salmon meal of the year, and just all those guys, like it was almost like, everybody brought it up, almost individually, like, oh wow, this is, and you could just sense the specialness for everybody. And it's just, I don't know, just kind of an interesting, not concept, but phenomenon. But
it's cool.
It's I think for me, it's like, if I'm getting into this where it gets kind of weird and hippie, I believe that some people are like biologically destined to be hunters and gatherers. Like it is ingrained in their DNA, and that is what they do. And they have like a calling that every fall, like they go into this manic mode of start consuming calories as fast as you can because the winter's coming. And so we set out a field and we try to hunt and pursue things. And the same thing exists for me with foraging, but it's in your head. Like you've now just survived when you've had that first meal. Like you've just got to that point where like, oh,
like everybody, I think, has it in them. It just has to get turned on.
Right.
Because
like you said, you just
for many years, for me, it was like fall came and it was like, okay, sports, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, sports are done. I guess now I'm like, didn't go pro. Sorry, guys. But then you're like, oh, now I got to do something in the fall. And then it's like fall's on. It's like, now I got to go hunting.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, you get that butter,
That's
Rick.
Should we talk about shrooms now?
I'm going to talk about shrooms, or we could, I guess we've covered a lot of things, but I was going to say right now, or we can even talk seasons, because there's a lot going on right now. Morels are still going,
we got pretty lucky. They kind of bumped us a couple of weeks because we've had very cool weather and a lot of moisture. Like Scotty,
tons of rain, never really got that hot.
Right, Scotty, who's been on the podcast before, he brought in a morel that his wife found last night. It's like 11 and a half inches long.
Jeez,
like that thing. That thing should have been done 2 weeks ago. Like, So we've had a really cool morel year in Wisconsin, and that we've got lucky. It's been extended. I think it extended the ramp seasons too. Like they didn't get burned off, they didn't get too hot, so they didn't die. There's a lot of fungus left. Like there's a whole summer and fall worth of fungus because there are some mushrooms that don't start until later in the summer.
What would be some common ones edible, easy to identify?
Ryan has one he thinks are better than morels.
So, and I think that's, particularly mushrooms. Yeah. I think mushrooms and berries, there's a lot of mushrooms out there.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, not all of them you can eat. What are ones that, I think that's part of the beauty of the morel. Like, you look at a morel, you're like, not too many look like that one.
Right.
I know what that one is.
Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
What are the pheasant backs?
Aside from false morels, they kind of look like morels, and they can make internal bleeding and diarrhea.
Yeah, not good. So morels, like iconic mushroom. Everybody who's like especially in the Midwest and out into like the American West where they grow in big numbers knows what they are. They're like a super coveted treat. Really good mushroom. I think they're tasty. I don't think they're that great. I don't do backflips over them. I love chasing them.
I was gonna bring
get the pitchforks. I was gonna bring that up though because when we're talking about if we are ultimately able to basically commercial crop these things, a lot of their specialness going to go away?
I think so. I think if you could go down to the store and you could buy morels like you could buy creminis or you could buy them like baby bellas, they just become another thing.
Yeah.
And
I do think they're pretty good. I'm going to say that.
they are. They're great. They're a delicious mushroom. I personally believe there are better mushrooms, like from a flavor, texture.
I will believe you there.
Okay.
I do think they're pretty good.
But they're neat to look at, and when you find them, it's like you found a little forest creature that you've read about.
Oh, they're just treasures.
They're like they remind me of like a little troll out in the woods.
And there's like something romantic about going out and like peeking under May apples and like, oh my God, there's one.
Yeah. They're like their own ecosystem.
Right.
That's exactly where Erik, when we were hunting turkeys last week, he found one in amongst the May apples. Hell of a spot.
Yeah. Yeah. And then of course there's the false morels.
Yep.
They're just out in the open.
Yep. They're
like
confidence builder.
They're
You're like, oh yeah,
dude. It's like red light district when you wind up in there. They're all flaunting their stuff, looking like morels a little bit, and you're all in there trying to you're ogling them up, and then
you're trying to resist, but you can't.
Right.
So this time of year, if you're in our area or in a similar band of latitude or growing periods and areas. Also on the roster is oysters. I really love oysters. Oysters are a great mushroom. The yellow ones are a non-native. They're technically an invasive. The brown ones I think are just normal. They grow in the woods. Another mushroom that's been cultivated and domesticated. So there's a lot of them that you can go to the store. You can go to like Woodman's or Metcalf's downtown. You can go pick them up if you want. But they're fun to chase down and hunt, I guess. You can see them. I use binoculars when I hunt for oysters.
So where do they grow?
On dead trees. A lot of times still standing dead trees.
Okay.
Not in the dirt. I've not found them in the dirt like a chanterelle. Like you'll find a chanterelle in the dirt or on the understory in the leaves. But the oysters are great. You get a ton of them when you get them. Usually it's like the size of a volleyball to a basketball or bigger. You get like pounds of them at a go. They're very tasty, very flavorful. I like their texture. They're good sautéed. They're good chopped. They're good in a soup. They're good everywhere. Dry them, reconstitute them, blanch them, freeze them, fry them, freeze them, whatever. They're awesome.
Any special cleaning?
Minimal. So if you get them wet, they kind of wilt.
So you want to be careful with that, right?
So they get really slimy if you get them wet. So I don't.
Which is weird because they're fungus.
Yeah.
Well, and they get rained on.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you look at them, like I nip them off of their their anchor point on the piece of wood that they're on, and then I inspect them for bugs and dirt, and I'll brush that away, and then usually just tear them off in clumps, and then fry them or dry them or whatever. Minimal cleaning, like I don't rinse them.
See, when you're getting that little bit of dirt in your food and whatnot,
that's good for you.
All. Yeah, that's good for you.
Yeah.
That's building up those antibodies for when World War Z comes around. We're the people who will be not infected.
All the minerals.
So be careful with oysters. Though one lookalike is called jack-o'-lantern.
Dang it! There's always a lookalike. Now I'm gonna look it up.
And it's a fairly different oyster. When in doubt, put it in the dark. Jack-o'-lanterns glow. Oysters do not.
Wait. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds fun though.
Yeah. Right. It's a fun activity, kids. Don't eat jack-o'-lantern mushrooms.
What is that going to do? Internal bleeding and all the false morel stuff?
I don't know what happens with jack-o'-lanterns, but I know they're toxic. So I don't know if you end up.
Gosh, they look toxic. It looks like somebody dropped a ball of dough on accident, and it has just been rising in the corner of a greasy kitchen for a long time. Is that what they look like?
Yeah, that's jack-o'-lanterns.
So pull up the oyster.
I want to see it
All
in
right,
the
yeah,
dark.
hold on. We're going to bring up the oyster here.
Specifically the
oyster,
golden.
mushroom, golden. They do. Ryan sent me a photo of these things, and they do kind of tend to Like, okay, sometimes they look a little fluty, and sometimes they look a little like bally.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there's a cluster. It's
Fluty and bally.
I don't even know what this is growing on. It's like growing on like.
So that's on like
a milk carton.
Actually, yeah, probably.
How does that happen?
So that's a commercially grown one.
Oh, it's a commercially grown one.
Yep.
Okay, I see. I gotta find one that's wild green.
Would
So
that be
they're
something
kind of
that-
like they kind of come up and they make like look like something you'd see under the sea, like in an anemone.
What is the timing on those?
So from now until September.
Serious, just like all summer.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. What other mushrooms are out there, Ryan?
Chicken of the woods, which
Oh,
is
yeah, that's right. Chicken of the woods.
That thing's gnarly looking.
It can be. So the one I found a really good one last weekend, but we have a ton of rain, so it became hypersaturated and grew quite bulbous. Usually they don't look like that. They look more kind of like the traditional polypore would be kind of fanned out. It's not a polypore.
They're kind of flat-ish.
Yeah,
right?
flattish, kind of bumpy looking.
I was going up when I made that characterization of gnarly looking. I was going off the one that you sent me. 'Cause
Yeah,
my
which was
reply
gnarly
back
looking.
was, "What is that?"
Yeah, correct. It looked like an asteroid, like something that would have come from Mars or the sun or something. And amazing mushroom, very delicious. A lot of moisture. You kind of got to cook them for a while, especially if they're wet like that. Great mushroom, really vibrant looking. There's a couple lookalikes, but not.
Did they get their name because they taste like
They
chicken?
taste like chicken. They have a texture very similar to chicken.
Oh, seriously? So like
yeah.
they're not like some mushrooms you bite into them and it just kind of like falls apart. You know,
Yeah, almost.
those are like chicken. Like
they've got a little more resistance to them, if you
Okay.
will. So
Rick is just
This is
been
amazing.
eating. Have you said anything yet, Rick?
Hey guys, I'm here.
that's a good one. There's a lot of like little like pheasant backs. Everybody's picking pheasant backs because that's like really low hanging fruit.
That's
told
what I
me I
sent
could
you
pick
that
one
one.
of
That's
those.
what I sent you that one time, and
Yep.
you were like, "Meh."
they're
Yeah,
they're
that's what
not
he
that
said to
good.
me.
I wanted to
too.
pick a mushroom really bad.
Here's
And
what I
was
like about
hey,
'em. You look
Ryan,
at
look
'em.
these.
There's nothing like them.
You can tell what
yeah,
it
it's
is.
pheasant back.
Did you
Definitely.
eat it, Jimmy?
No,
Describe-
I didn't
so
even
what-
pick it because Ryan told me it wasn't even worth the
What's to like or not
5
like?
feet walk.
Okay, so pheasant backs, they're probably my favorite mushroom to
Bring
take
up my
pictures
picture
of
it. It was
because
a
they're very,
gigantic mushroom.
They're beautiful.
yeah, they're lovely looking. They also called them dryad saddles. Dryad being the mythical forest,
Oh, the pheasant backs I found were growing next to a run-over badger,
Oh, nice.
which was unfortunate.
That's very spiritual or something.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's a
Signifies the Badgers football season. Anyways,
Jeez, Rick.
it's a mushroom that I think a lot of people pick because you hear you can eat about it, or you can hear that you can eat it, but it's not really that great. They taste kind of like cucumber, which is very strange because
It's weird. They don't look anything like they would taste like that.
Yeah,
but they smell like cucumbers too.
Yeah. So the trick with the pheasant backs that I found is if you get a pheasant back, size has no dictation on whether this is going to be a palatable mushroom or not. Intuitively, we think a very large one would be very old and ergo
Right.
then not good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whereas small ones you would think would be tender and
Oh, like
delicious.
the veal of mushrooms.
Yeah, not the case. So some of the best pheasant backs I've had have been like the size of dinner plates or larger.
Yeah.
And so I take them, if I'm going to prepare them, and I give them a little bend. If they snap, they're good to go. If they bend and they're rubbery, not worth it. If you're adamant about trying them, slice them very thin, quick sear. Like I said, they kind of got like a cucumber-ish taste to them. What I want to do
Any
is
salt or pepper on them, or just
yeah,
salt, butter?
salt, pepper, butter. I like to put like a fruity balsamic on it. We've got this great place to the north of us in a town called Baraboo that sells amazing balsamics, and I like to put that on there. That's fun. But what I want to do is I want to get a bunch of pheasant backs. I want to dry them and powder them, and I want to do something with mushroom powder. I have no idea what, but I want
The
to do
heck,
something.
man! I
with-
had a whole freaking tree right there. in
oh,
front of me.
they're
You should've had me-
everywhere. They're-
Seasoned with dead badger.
right.
Yeah, that was a little weird. All right. How
So they
about
snap. Now we're talking a snap, kind of like the bottom of an asparagus when you snap that
kind
off.
of. Well, I mean, if you were to go buy like a large Bella cap,
Yeah.
and you like they break apart, right?
Okay, right.
Like styrofoam snaps.
Okay.
Yeah. Best way I can describe.
So like
that.
there's not a lot of dexterity there. Just like it's either snapping or it's bending. Gotcha.
I enjoyed the one time that you found an elf cup.
yeah, elf cups. Those are edible.
Are they good?
It just kind of tastes like a mushroom.
They're just kind of, but it's a really cool mushroom to
Very
find.
cool looking mushroom, yeah.
Because they just
cool.
die if you look at them.
Yep, pretty much. Most of the cups and urns you can eat. So there's a whole bunch of those when you look at them. They're all very similar mushrooms in structure. Very delicate, very attractive addition to a dish, but I don't know that they're necessarily worth going out for the flavor aspect. Whereas like I will absolutely go out and look for morels, or I will absolutely go out and look for oysters or chickens or hen of the woods, which is a different fall time mushroom, different than chicken. Yeah, so elf cups.
You had to be real careful when you're digging out the elf cup. Like that was part of the allure of it. It's so delicate.
Yeah.
Like you can't even. You got to like go up to the elf cup, not looking at it, or else it'll see you looking at it and
Startles.
it'll just die.
Yeah.
That's not what I just looked up a picture. Very vibrant in color.
Super cool.
That was one, or that is one. If I were to see that in the woods, I'd be like,
it's
stay
like
away
poisonous
from that one.
frogs.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know?
Like a poisonous frog.
Do not lick it. Maybe tip your arrow.
Right.
But they are, you found that one, and you're saying how they tend to shrivel up.
They're very delicate.
Would that be something you'd, if you had a means to like cook it very quickly after
I'm
foraging it, or
Or
could be
just don't
good.
even bother.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just let them go. They're very pretty.
leave it for the elves?
Yeah.
I very much enjoy looking at them.
Shrooms, though. Cool stuff.
Those are the big ones for mushrooms. You can get a lot of yield out of that. So look for your oysters, look for your morels, of course. Look for your chickens and your hens. They're very flavorful. They're very delicious. They go well with a lot of things. And they're fun to harvest.
It's a smart thing to get one of those field books you talked about
definitely.
before you go out and start plucking everything. Because I remember, man, I was hot on the case of those false morels that I kept sending you pictures of.
Yep.
Because I was
and
like,
you're
look
like
at this thing, man. And you were like, oh, man. Or, no, I didn't send
CD
any pictures
service
yet.
area. Couldn't get service. I'm like,
so I'm like, dude, these things, they're like orange. They're coming out of the ground. And he's like, oh, it could be chickens. And I was just like, and then he was like, well, maybe they're chanterelles. And I was like, and then it was like, well, maybe they're. And then I'd send him a picture. He's like, false morels will result in internal hemorrhaging, diarrhea, upset abdomen, and just
don't eat.
Yeah,
do not
eat. Yeah.
Now, what about? Let's say you do come across, and maybe this applies to all mushrooms, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. As far as preservation, you know, we've talked about drying, powders. I know one time it's criminal, we got into the chanterelles heavy back in Washington one day, and we froze them.
Side note, chanterelle might be the king of the mushrooms.
Well,
were you talking about like flavor or what?
Oh, that's a good mushroom.
We got into like the mother look. Like I've never seen a year like it. We actually quit deer hunting for the day and just picked mushrooms. But we froze them, and I feel like it ruined them.
It does, yeah.
Mark quit deer hunting to get mushrooms.
Yes.
So
that must have been
when
crazy.
you would thaw those, they'd be pretty squishy.
Yeah,
really.
They weren't good. So is dry, if you're gonna try and preserve for later, I guess what's the
what a mushroom? Look at that thing.
Gorgeous, aren't they? They look like a beautiful trumpet emitting from the forest floor.
It looks like something that like
you expect to see in Fantasia.
Exactly. Look at that beautiful mushroom.
very golden in
the
color.
palominos
of mushrooms. Yeah. Drying. I really like drying because they reconstitute and they get kind of a chewy texture to them, and I really like that. I like mushrooms in general. But some
dehydrator or
how do you reconstitute
oven rack,
a mushroom?
what do you
just dunk it in water?
Yeah, you can do that. You can put them in a pan on low or medium heat with water and just kind of let them soak back up. Or like the other day I put, what did I do? Well, I had those chicken of the woods. I had some ramps. I had some dried morels. I added them all together. A little bit of olive oil on there and a little bit of balsamic and some butter. And like the juices from all of those things swirling together reconstituted my morels to this point of chewy, but not like
rubbery.
Right. Like it just had like the perfect amount of give when you bit into it, but you didn't like just dissolve it in your mouth. Nice. So yeah, it was really good then. That's what I like to do with mushrooms. Dry them if you can.
How are you drying them though?
Dehydrator.
Dehydrator?
Yep.
Okay.
So I dry them till they're dry, and then I put them in a ball jar and preserve them. And then, like I said, you can, with oysters, if you saute them first and then freeze them, they're perfect. So,
interesting.
Yeah, light saute, just cook them and freeze them, and they reconstitute well. Because think of like all the things, like a piece of pizza that had cooked mushrooms on it. You heat that back up. Hey, it's good to go, right? You still get all the best parts about the mushroom. and you're reheating it. So just
Mark doesn't reheat anything.
right.
Not a big reheater.
No, he just eats cold.
He does. It's weird.
Yeah, he's got kids, so he's got to eat when he can. But yeah, that's what I like to do with those.
Can we talk maple syrup now?
Well, okay. I was trying to segue into asparagus really quick, just because it's
Fine,
timely.
do it. Okay, yes, do it. Because you can find asparagus growing in a ditch.
Right?
Yep. Last night found
Which
a
I
good,
think you did.
good
at
pound
one
last night.
Really?
Yep.
Does it look just like it does in the grocery store, just
That
coming
is-
up out of the ground?
Yeah, it gets a lot bigger a lot of times out here. So it's feral. I don't think that like asparagus grows around here by itself. Like it's an escapee from somebody's
Right.
garden. And however many generations and centuries ago that might have been, so be it. Obviously very good, tastes like asparagus, but yeah, you get some monsters.
What's the proper way to pick it?
So ideally you find them before they leaf out, although
Yeah.
I don't really mind them when they're leafed out, so long as they're still tender, and then the little offshoots can be really good too. But I grab it at the top, and then I bend it over, and I kind of like roll it down on itself until it snaps.
Yep.
And at the point at which it snaps is the point in which it's tender. So beyond that, it's kind of woody and chewy.
When I buy asparagus at the store, I do,
You do the same thing. Yep. You bring it home, and you kind of fold them, and snaps off.
Just finds
Yep.
that natural point and
Yep.
Oh, I
pop.
just
No.
snip off. Oh.
Oh, it'll break where it's supposed to break, Jim.
Yep. And
Let the asparagus tell you.
Correct.
where it
I
wants
just
to
take a
break.
knife and just cut the whole bushel like where the white stops.
And
That's fine.
that's probably fine because that's like commercially grown asparagus and it's very tender at that size. But
Yeah.
when you get out into some of the stuff, like some of the stuff that I found the other day was like waist high. So
Really?
yeah. So like some like only
I would actually I'd run the other way. That's terrifying.
Right,
An
some
asparagus
Jurassic-
almost
Yeah.
as big as I
Get
am.
freaking lost in that.
some like you get like 8. You
Like
get
grow
like
a mouth and
Jurassic asparagus.
right. You might get 8 or 9 inches of edible there.
Okay.
And you could probably eat the whole thing and just be very woody.
So you're just like, that's super high, but you're just taking that top.
Yep.
then.
So if
Now,
you,
what's a... Oh,
well, if you pick it wrong, can you like wipe it out?
I think so. Yeah.
Because growing up, we used to have asparagus in
Yeah.
my
You
parents'
didn't
backyard.
pick the whole patch.
I picked the whole patch,
That was the
and
end of
I
it.
would snap them at the base, and then one year the asparagus never came back.
That's right. Yeah. So if it can't seed and it can't come back,
Sorry,
then it ain't
Mom and
gonna-
Dad.
It ain't gonna make it.
I just
this whole
kept-
time they've been wondering too. They're like, I wonder what happened.
Yeah.
I just kept petting it and then it died.
Oh, that's funny.
All right.
Yeah, so
that was for my own selfish. I just needed to know.
Take until it's gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
I could tell you were really going after
Yeah,
something. There
yeah,
was a
yeah.
story
That's why I
there.
was at. Okay, anyways, you had a question.
Yeah, like asking for a friend. Is there a wrong way you can do this
Can you
that
kill this?
potentially results in it not being there anymore?
Pretty bird. Pretty bird.
What? So fun to look for.
Yep.
Weather's nice right now. I'd
Generally.
say in general, right?
Yep.
What's a person if a person's you said it's commonly grown in ditches like
Yep.
roadside ditches?
Yep. That's where you find it. Seems to do good up here. I wonder if it has to do with the salt that we put on the sides of the road.
That'd be interesting.
Yep.
But what?
Yeah,
So
I
what do
like
you?
salt. I
You just
don't
find a
blame the
ditch, or
asparagus.
are you seeing something and then you're like, yep, there's asparagus there, and then you're gonna go find more.
Find a ditch, look for asparagus leafing out in it. I did find one at the top of a local rock outcropping, very, very, very high up, super out of place. One sprig of asparagus. It's there every year. I should go visit it and take a picture of it.
Go visit it.
Just say hi, catch up, see
Yeah.
what it's been up to.
Don't let me
I don't
pick
know
it.
what it's doing up there, but it's up there.
It won't be back
But
next
yeah,
year.
generally, like you find them in the road ditches.
Are they like potatoes where like dead asparagus just grows more asparagus or what?
Well, yeah. So in the fall time, so we talk about foraging in the spring being a great time to scout for the fall. Hunting in the fall is a great time to scout for asparagus in the spring. You'll see them, assuming the ditch didn't get mowed, as this super vibrant, bright yellow bush.
What?
Yeah, it
jeez.
turns-
All right, now I'm googling again.
Like Pikachu yellow.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, in this like drab landscape. And drop your pin in your Onyx program there, deer feeder, for asparagus, because it's going to be there in the spring.
Deer feeder.
Yep.
Wild asparagus. I'm Google imaging this now.
But you got to look at it in the fall because it turns a super characteristic color.
Okay, so sure enough, I'm seeing it now where it's growing out of the ground. It does look just like it looks at the grocery store. Okay, wild asparagus in fall. Pikachu yellow. I totally got the image in in my head when you said Pikachu yellow, by the way. So that was a great. Oh, whoa, like that?
Yep.
Is that?
Boom.
God, it looks like a yellow tumbleweed.
Yeah,
It seriously
it does
does.
look like
It looks like
tumbleweed.
it also looks like something that you shouldn't go near.
Yeah, so you can see that in the fall time, and you'd be like, definitely, that's absolutely asparagus. And you wait till like
Really?
one of those October days where it's like rained a little bit and it's cloudy
Yeah,
out, and that
pops.
thing looks like a road flare.
That thing looks like abstract art.
Yep, absolutely.
It looks like you'd go near it and it would electrocute you.
yep, pretty much.
That's wild.
Holy crap.
There's no like organization to it either. It's just
No.
I've been walking past those things for quite some time and had no idea what the heck they were.
dang it. Yeah.
I thought they were tamarack trees.
They look exactly like tamaracks do. That's an excellent color reference. If you've ever seen a tamarack
work
right
here is
before it's
done.
dropped its needles, they are the same color and like visual texture as tamarack.
Yeah.
You finally swallowed your food and said something worthwhile here. I appreciate
That's
that.
funny.
So well, I found out a lot more things that you can find, forage, eat in the spring. That's the extent of. Are there more things before we transition to Jim's?
So I go.
Whatever Jim wants to talk about.
Save my
Let's
applause.
run through for the sake of time. Let's run through, I guess, what I'm after. Starting early in the spring, you're with your mushroom. Well, starting early in the spring, it's with your maple syrup. But then mushrooms, and then we get into mulberries, and then we get into raspberries, and we get into gooseberries, blackberries, dewberries, wild plums, feral apples if you can find them. Gosh, what?
Hey,
the heck?
when we were in Nebraska, those plum thickets.
Yep.
We could go there and pick plums.
All day long.
We get out my deer in a plum thicket.
Yeah.
Literally inside of a plum thicket.
Yep. Pokey is all get out.
Oh, it was horrible. But also
Interesting.
awesome.
Okay.
There's a huge variety of berries. You can get wild strawberries. It's really hard to find because the mice eat them. They're very delicate. They're very close to the ground. Slugs get them a lot. But if you find a good wild strawberry patch, go back to it. And then focus on your summer mushrooms like chicken of the woods, like oysters. And then in fall time, hen of the woods, which is a much larger mushroom. And then we get into tree nuts, which is actually not something that I've done yet, but there's a guy, Jay's Black Walnuts out of Middleton. He collects black walnut, which is not typically something people pick up because they're very sticky and full of resin. He processes them and sells black walnut meats and then also makes cookies out of them. And I will be looking for black walnuts this fall, harvesting them.
I love cookies.
Our neighbor took down a black walnut tree.
Also good for gun stocks. But
made me sad. I liked it.
Yeah.
Going back to February and March, we talk about maple syrup, which is what Jim wanted to get to this whole time.
Yes. I thought it was interesting because I always thought that maple syrup was like a fall thing. Just because of like the taste of it. I don't know. Something about like warm pancakes and butter and like doing all that stuff reminds me of fall. And yet most of the actual, and you explain why, is because the trees are bringing back their leaves.
Mm-hmm.
So the tree's central brain system is like, send all that sap up to the branches. We're good now.
Yep.
We're good to go. Coast is clear. Old man winter. If you're in Wisconsin, they can never assume the old man winter is gone.
Mm-hmm.
But
trees coming out of dormancy, and there's pumping action occurring from the root structure through the tree into the bud structure and then back down, and the tree's jump starting. It's turning over. And then you just tap into that main vein, and
I feel like the maple syrup could be an entire podcast.
I've got 2 maples in my front yard that I could probably reach out and touch with a yardstick from my window, and I can't even wrap my whole arm. I can't even hug one.
That's
all
a
the way
doozy
around.
right there. You could run
2 of them.
Yep, could run a couple taps each.
I'm pretty sure the root system goes all the way into my backyard underneath my house, underneath the basement.
Wow. Large.
Because the branches go all the way out.
Yeah,
there, just about. But
is that an ideal tree, or is that not?
So
it's not a veal of maples.
Right.
So, obviously, sugar maples, like the sugar maple variety of maple, has the highest sugar content, like per volume, right?
Yeah.
So if you were to take that
So they
sap,
didn't do the whole like Greenland, Iceland thing there where they said
Nope.
sugar maple,
they
but it was
goofed up.
actually
Yeah, they should have called that like salt maple. People are like, I stay away from that. So sugar maples have the highest content per volume, but like
I'm trying to think, Ryan, is that about 2%?
I think 2 to 2.5 or something like that. I have to
Okay.
look back at it. Now, I don't have any sugar maples available to me. All I have are silver maples. Now, I make some pretty good maple syrup, and I like it. And it's just it's the same product at the end of it, right? It's just not as high of yield relative to the amount of sap that you pull out of it. So, I'm at like a 50 to 1 ratio or so. So 50 gallons of sap nets me maybe 1 gallon of syrup.
That's the thing
a lot
about
of boiling.
it, dude.
Yeah,
It's just so much boiling.
I tell you what, inspired by Ryan, I ventured into tapping a couple maple trees. I got not a ton of sap, but enough. I think the couple times that I've done it, I've made like a half a mason jar of maple syrup.
Basically in the butt.
Pain in the butt. Basically, what I did was like a proof of concept. It worked. I made syrup.
It's not
I got enough for
exceptionally
one
difficult,
pancake.
from what I've heard. Is that it? It's just that it takes for.
It is time consuming, but it is cool. It is amazing that you pull this clear. It basically looks like you've pulled water out of the tree, and you boil it, and you boil it, and you boil it, and then all of a sudden you have maple syrup. I have such a greater appreciation for maple syrup now than I had before.
Yeah.
Just how much work went into it.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue. So because you're by far, I mean, how many gallons of sap do you make on average in a year?
I process, probably 100 and, not a lot. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like from maple syrup production, if you get into like central to northern Wisconsin, the guys up there, some of the biggest sugar bushes in the U.S. are in Wisconsin, Michigan, Maine, Vermont, and some in Minnesota. We're talking they make thousands of gallons of syrup a year. So again, I'm getting a 50 to 1 ratio with horribly inefficient equipment. They might be besting that by maybe 10 points. They're still processing a ton of sap, tons and tons and tons and tons of sap, thousands of gallons to get this yield. So I think the most I ever did, I finished out with like 170 ounces of sap. So multiply that by 40 or 50, and that's about how much I boiled.
Wait, ounces or gallons?
Ounces. So, it's not a lot, 128 ounces in a gallon. So a lot of sap to get.
Oh, of syrup. Okay,
Yeah.
No, my bad. Okay.
Yeah, so
syrup.
170 something ounces of syrup.
That's a lot of work. Then that's where you're getting out the turkey fryers. You're boiling it. But you get it to a certain point where you've boiled it so much. Then you go to the stove top and you boil it and you boil it and you boil it. But
I, through trial and error, have done it in stages where I'll boil to a concentrate. My concentrate I judge based on color. I jar my concentrate, put it in my fridge because then I can do more of it and I can keep that concentrate stable for a while. Then I finish that concentrate on my stovetop, just in a pan. That I've got
not even in like a sauce dish, like a pan.
No, it's like a stainless steel pan. I also make macaroni and cheese in that same pan. So,
Where's that at?
Rick's over here like, I wonder if I put hot dogs in mac and cheese. I boil that down and then I end up with finished product there in that saucepan.
What's the thing called? I bought one and then just ended up not using it.
Hygrometer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you already know.
Right. That's the same thing I don't use either. I have a hygrometer. I don't use it. I put a fork in my maple syrup when I say it looks-ish like maple syrup. I go based on the bubble content, how long my bubbles stick around, the size of my bubbles, and when I agitate the syrup when it's boiling, what my bubbles behave like.
So...
Because if you don't get it all the way down, you can mold, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I had molding last year on a micro batch that I did, and I actually found out that it's because I used these adorable bottles that I imported because I wanted to give everybody these little 4.25 ounce bottles that have like little swing tops on them.
Dang it.
The bottles cool too fast and they allow for the proliferation of bacteria on the surface on any remnant water. And so I ended up with
that's what happens when you're trying
So
to be
the cooling-
all Pinteresty and cute and
stupid.
I'm
Gosh,
sorry,
that's like
Ryan.
counterintuitive. I feel like if
it
it
is.
cooled fast, you'd be less likely to have.
No,
Anyway,
I goofed up.
speaking of macaroni, and I guess to
You're
visualize,
gonna go
right?
Buddy the Elf on us and put syrup on your macaroni?
Don't tempt me. But in my vast syruping experience, but when you're boiling that down and when it starts to get close, it does start to bubble up, almost akin to like when you're if you got some boxed macaroni and you get her on high, and all of a sudden you've got this overflow of white foam.
That's how
it's
you
almost
start,
like
that's
that.
how you start a fire. Yep, absolutely. 2 years ago, I burned down a turkey fryer because I walked away for like 6 minutes and came back to smoldering and molten aluminum. Yeah, it was amazing. So
grease fire or syrup fire? Which is worse?
I think syrup because it like sticks to you like napalm.
Oh God,
It's awful. It's terrible stuff. So yeah,
and that happens. At least when I was watching it, it kind of went from
stable to not
very quickly. Yeah.
Dang.
You gotta keep an eye on it. I made first time that I made maple candy.
Yep. Accidental, but still good.
Accidental, but still good. Yeah.
Further reason I don't think I'm going to do this thing.
You need to do it.
It's a ton of work. I can start a maple syrup fire.
Get covered in napalm.
Friggin'
macaroni and cheese.
Macaroni and cheese. I don't even like mac and cheese that much.
Right?
Too many carbs.
What else do you have, Jim? You've got a list. I feel like
you already went through everything on my list. I'm absolutely amazed at how much we've discussed here regarding foraging and gardening and all these things that
I feel like there's
goes
so much more
well
too.
with hunting. Oh, there's so much more, and I hope that. Here's the thing: is that MC Ryan has this super nifty shot clock for us up here that says when we've been talking for a long time.
It gets red when we get over an hour.
It actually does, yeah, and it's the part where the cameras don't turn around and show you when it's turned red. But it is red now. But how about at this point, we'll just say that if you've been listening, there may be things we haven't gone over, and if there are things that you can think of that we haven't gone over, you're probably like white-knuckling your steering wheel, screaming at us, saying, why didn't you talk about this yet? And if that's the case, wait till you park your car or park your lawnmower or, do whatever. I don't know you're doing. And then comment on Instagram, send us a message and say, I would like to hear more about this topic.
And I would add, we've talked about a lot of stuff, here in Wisconsin, and a lot of these things are very regional. And I know, back in my Washington State days, one thing that we had an abundance of were these big, beautiful, luscious blackberries that I just took for granted as they're just all around. And so I'd say, like, similar to you, Jim, but if people special. Exactly, listener, if you have things that you like to forage that are, intrinsic or regional to your area, let us know because we want to hear about those.
Shout out to our folks in the American South and Southwest. You got that cactus fruit.
We would love to talk about cactus fruit.
You got that cactus fruit.
Eric and I found some what I think was prickly pear.
We have prickly pear here.
It's endemic. Hunting.
It's endemic to Wisconsin.
Yeah. It was in a very dry, deserty looking
Dude,
spot.
it looked like we were in...
I got a picture of it.
Like either Oklahoma or somewhere in South Dakota.
This is the interesting part about the driftless region where the glaciation didn't occur, and we have prickly pear cactus growing here.
Yep.
Now, Minnesota, right sandwiched in the middle between one of my favorite states, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. We don't have that except for like in the furthest southwest corner. So prickly pear too, another great food.
What the heck?
Yeah, Wisconsin prickly pear, man.
That's Wisconsin.
That was last week.
We're gonna have to post that on.
We're 10 minutes from a prickly pear plant right now. I can bring you to it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
There's also a natural like a stream or like a spring because like it had rained the night before. It then stopped. Everything was dry, and we're like, "What the heck? Why is it still covered in water?" And we got up on top, and there was this like natural spring.
Yep.
I was we should get those and eat them. And then I was like, well, maybe they're protected in Wisconsin. It seems like something that might be protected.
I don't know. Yeah. But prickly pear, the pears, the palms or whatever you would call them, very common in like traditional Mexican foods and
find them in the grocery store.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for all you folks in the Southwest, cactus fruit, that's a winner. Amazing stuff. In the American South, like Georgia and stuff like that, all the cool tree fruits and nuts that you guys have down there. A lot of the same stuff occurs here as it does in like New York, Maine, Vermont.
Let's talk about coastal places. You got kelps, seaweeds.
Yeah, there's
all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah. Get some listener specials going about this stuff.
I like it.
Bring some out-of-staters.
Yeah.
Let's hear what you got. All right. Well, we'll call that a last call and stick a fork in it, literally. Oh, my gosh. Rick.
Do the honors.
You ate a lot. Yeah, stick a fork in that jam there. I'm kind of getting sleepy from all that butter.
Just so you know, we almost consumed a third pound of butter between the four of us.
I call that a win.
Good day. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. As always, like we said, hit us up with suggestions and things like that on Instagram. Rate this podcast on iTunes, too. We'd love to see the ratings from you guys and hear your thoughts.
Follow on YouTube.
Don't rate the long goodbye part.
The what?
I feel like this has been a long goodbye.
Yeah, it has. Sorry, guys. Okay, bye.
Bye.
All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. Again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.